He only wanted a quiet night, a simple moment of peace after a long day. But when he walked into that room, he didn't know he was stepping into a storm that had nothing to do with him, except the color of his skin. What started as kindness turned into whispers, stares, and a decision that would alter his life forever. This wasn't just one man's burden. It was a mirror reflecting a truth many try to ignore. And the question remains, how much can one act of prejudice really change everything? For most of his life, Marcus tried to blend in. He wasn't rich, and he wasn't powerful. Just a hard-working young man who showed up every day at the cafe on the corner, pouring coffee with a smile that made regulars feel welcome. To him, it was routine, a small rhythm of life he could depend on. His co-workers knew him as reliable, respectful, and always the one who stayed late to clean up after others. Outside of work, Marcus had dreams, quiet ones he rarely shared. He wanted stability, a chance to prove himself, maybe even a future where he wouldn't have to worry about being judged before he ever spoke. For a while, the cafe felt safe, like a small pocket of normal where the world's cruelties couldn't reach him. But safety, for someone like Marcus, was fragile. All it took was one night, one encounter to tear it apart. He didn't see it coming. He couldn't have. Because when privilege and prejudice collided with his simple, ordinary world, everything shifted. What seemed like just another shift at work was about to unravel into a story that would leave scars far deeper than anyone in that room understood. The night had started like any other. Marcus wiped down the last table, humming quietly to himself, ready to clock out. But then the door swung open. A group of well-dressed patrons walked in, expensive suits, diamond watches, the kind of people who never usually set foot in this small cafe. Behind them trailed a boy in a wheelchair, no older than 10, with eyes that lit up at the sight of the jukebox in the corner. Marcus noticed how the boy's gaze lingered, and how badly he seemed to want to get up, to move with the music. But his father, a man whose presence filled the room like a shadow, didn't notice, or maybe didn't care. His attention was on the menu, his tone sharp with impatience. When the boy gestured toward the jukebox, Marcus acted without hesitation. He walked over, smiled, and gently asked if the boy wanted to try a step. He knew what it was like to long for something simple, to feel invisible. So, with steady hands, Marcus helped him from his chair, guiding his feet to the rhythm of the song. For the first time that evening, the boy's face broke into pure joy, but not everyone shared that joy. Whispers started. A waitress shot Marcus a nervous look. One of the suited men cleared his throat, glaring as if Marcus had overstepped some unspoken line. And then the father looked up. His eyes narrowed, cold and sharp, scanning the sight of a black waiter guiding his disabled son across the floor. The room felt heavier in an instant. Conversations hushed. Even the music seemed to dim beneath the weight of judgment. Marcus felt the shift, the way eyes pressed against him, not with admiration, but with suspicion. Was it wrong to show kindness? Was it dangerous to stand out? The father rose from his chair, each step toward them echoing like a warning. He towered over Marcus, his silence more menacing than words. And then, with a voice that carried both authority and disdain, he demanded to know what Marcus thought he was doing. Marcus's chest tightened. He wanted to explain, this was just kindness, just humanity. But the tone, the sneer, told him that no explanation would matter. Because beneath the polished suit and billionaire's confidence, there was a line Marcus wasn't supposed to cross. And by helping that boy dance, he had crossed it. The boy, still smiling, didn't see the storm gathering in his father's expression. He didn't hear the quiet mutters from the table or notice how Marcus's hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of knowing what was coming next, because this wasn't just about a dance. This was about power, race, and who was allowed to hold joy in their hands, and in that moment, Marcus realized something was about to break. The cafe went silent, the music fading beneath the weight of the father's voice. His words cut sharper than the chill in the air. "Put him down." Marcus froze. The boy's small hands still clung to his, eyes glowing with a joy that innocence refused to hide. But the billionaire's glare made it clear, this wasn't about a dance. It was about control, about power, about who was allowed to touch his son and who wasn't. Whispers rose again, fueled by judgment. Some looked away, unwilling to interfere. Others stared, hungry for the spectacle of confrontation. Marcus felt every gaze, every unspoken accusation pressing against him. He had crossed an invisible line, and now the room demanded he pay for it. The father's footsteps echoed closer, heavy with authority. "A man like you," he hissed, "doesn't get to decide what's best for my child." The words dripped with venom, not just rejecting Marcus's kindness, but reducing him to nothing more than the color of his skin. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that all he had done was give a child a moment of freedom. But deep down he knew the truth. Nothing he said would matter. In this room, in this moment, he wasn't seen as human. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve, pleading softly, "But I want to dance." His innocence cracked against the hard wall of prejudice. But even that small voice couldn't shift the father's anger. Instead, the man pulled his son away, leaving Marcus standing in the center of the room, alone, humiliated, and exposed. It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure, and as the boy's wheelchair rolled back to the table, the last thing Marcus saw was the sparkle in the child's eyes dimming, snuffed out not by disability, but by the weight of a world that refused to let joy cross certain lines. Marcus finished his shift in silence. The room carried on as if nothing had happened, but inside everything had changed. His hands still trembled, not from fear, but from the sting of humiliation. He had offered kindness, and for that he was reduced, shamed, and erased. On his way home, the streets felt different. The glow of the streetlights and the hum of passing cars, ordinary details that once gave comfort, now seemed like reminders that safety was never guaranteed. For Marcus, the cafe was no longer just a workplace. It was a battlefield, one where his very existence could ignite conflict. But what stayed with him most wasn't the billionaire's glare or the whispers of the crowd. It was the boy's eyes, the light that flickered when joy was taken from him, not by his disability, but by the prejudice surrounding him. That moment revealed a truth Marcus already knew too well. Racism doesn't just wound the target. It steals innocence, and it teaches children where the lines are drawn long before they should ever have to learn. This wasn't just Marcus's story. It was the story of countless others, living in a world where dignity is conditional, where kindness can be twisted into trespass, and where humanity is filtered through prejudice before it's ever recognized. And so the question lingers, how many more Marcuses will walk home with invisible scars? How many children will have their joy stolen before society decides that enough is enough? Because until that answer changes, these stories won't stop. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we ask ourselves, are we willing to be the silent crowd? Or the voice that finally breaks it?